Michael, you are muted.
Unmute, continue. How are we doing? We're on?
We are on now.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for coming this holiday. I know you have a choice where to go, so I'm glad you spent it with me here. And I hope that I have some good information for you. I believe I do, because I was quite interested reading it and doing it myself. So I hope you'll feel the same. Okay, so let's start off on that. Let's go to our first slide. So this is a social democracy. It's formed at the crossroad between solidarity and, here's a mouthful, subsidiarity. There is such a word. And solidarity is a key concept in German social policy. The belief that society is responsible for the well-being of its members, and that's called solidarity. So for instance, Germany has a social market economy. It's combining capitalist production mode with firm belief that society should protect all its members from economic and social need. So thus the Germans combine the notion of solidarity with a federally decentralized arrangement of power sharing as applies to subsidiarity. So subsidiarity, of course, is the other key concept here from the German political culture. And it just translates to self-governance. And these are often, that's what it's often referred to as self-governance. And these come from the old church doctrines that go way back. And it has to do with how people act as citizens of a society. And this is how they're supposed to do it. So for instance, German-speaking nations by nature tend to build up social organizations and society from the bottom up rather than the top down, as a consequence of a long history of decentralization. Actually, they did have the Holy Roman Empire in Germany for a very short time after the barbarians sacked Rome and it all fell in. Then they had the Heilige Romanish kingdom there. Anyway, so this subsidiarity applies there, and they use a higher level of institutions only when lower level ones are found to be inadequate. So sustainable local self-government model, it reduces central authority to a supervisory role. Now, so solidarity and subsidiarity influence the construction of a national social policy through various entities, and the greatest effect of those entities was on providing the implementation of state policy. Okay, now there are strong undercurrents, and you'll see running through all socio-political institutions and policies in German-speaking countries as well along this. And it really goes all back to the Holy Roman Empire and the German states later during the Napoleonic Wars. Okay, so social democracy, the last century's dominance, and this century's political disappearing act. You know, there just aren't very many social democrats out there anymore. And it all started, I think, with Gerhard Schröder, you know, when he sort of put them in the SPD in a tizzy by implementing these plans for the economy that were very contradictory to what the Labour Party wanted, but he made a decision that he thought was correct. So anyways, social democrats, they fought for the principles such as...
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. They fought for the principles of social welfare state and the notion that society is responsible for its weaker members, and the idea everyone should have equal opportunity to participate in society. Now, all these are cornerstones of the German and Nordic capitalism. So they are reflected in their institutions, policies, and social society, especially as relates to labor relations, education, and corporate governance. So German-speaking culture shared identity centers on concept of work from which they derive pride, sense of self, and a professional confidence. So yet they never talk shop or consider it rude when Americans ask, you know, what do you do for work? I mean, I remember when I lived in Germany, if I did that, people would just give me a blank stare and not respond. So eventually I learned to stop doing it. So now in the digitized world of gig labor and large service economies, it's altered the political terrain a lot. So in the absence of social democrats, who will be the ones to take the rising inequality issue and this onslaught on rights that we see happening to us? And there you see the SPD banner. And then if you look here, the SPD's vote, they're in the dotted line. So you can see they were in a very high time in the 70s and they dropped very low in recently. And then the German Social Democratic Party tradition, the German politicians are pragmatic in policy choices. So even if against their party ideology and the electorate's wishes, crossing party lines to make pragmatic, unpopular decisions happens all throughout history. Bismarck did it, Schröder did it, Merkel just did it. So it's happening a lot all the time. So labor was willingly, for instance, labor has willingly chosen to forego pay raises in the past to keep German firms competitive. And they willingly opting out to sacrifice for what they believe is the greater good. Bismarck foresaw this kind of trade-off happening when he formed the social welfare state. So crossing the lines, it's not uncommon to see an arch-conservative like Bismarck even, who preferred autocratic rule to democracy. He became the founder of the German Social Welfare Society. Now, German leaders tend to size up a situation and do what's most pragmatic to resolve issues. You'll see this also with Nordics as well. And then conversely, Gerhard Schröder, a confirmed pro-labor social democrat, instituted Hartz reforms 2002 to 2004. It was so unpopular with labor, he had to exit as party leader in midterm. And that's when Angela Merkel took over. And when she won the 2005 election, forming a new coalition government as CDU, the Christian Democratic Union Party leader. So she was a political realist as well, aware that the export economy's pressing need for more skilled labor. Now, Germany is a huge export economy. We can't forget that. So can migrants counter the German declining birth rate and the shift to university education trend, which more of them are doing? Merkel herself pursued an unpopular, though pragmatic, refugee migration policy to fill the gap. So she will still step down at the end of this year, her term end, after embarrassing past election results. And then also, let's look at the Ludwig Erhard now. So Ludwig Erhard was the architect of the economic miracle. He believed in the social market economy, a free economy with a social consciousness. So, and he was going to use Mitbestimmung and Mittelstand to lead the way. Mitbestimmung is co-determination, working together as a group, and I'll be doing a couple slides to explain that. And then also out with the old, in with the new, not expecting a miracle, but open to it. It turned out to be the Wirtschaftswunder. They say the economic miracle turned out to happen in Germany from Ludwig Erhard's guidance. And he wrote this book. You see the bottom there, Progress Through Competition. He wrote that book. And then here, if you, this is a good indication of the export economy in Germany. You look and you see the graph from 1970 to 2015, and it just goes straight up for exports. They just keep increasing. So Germany is that makes her, that makes her beholden to the aggregate demand that's coming from other countries. Okay, so let's do the next slide. So Ludwig Erhard never took credit for German economic Mittelstand. In his book, Prosperity Through Competition, he lays out his plan, and it indicates in his 1958 book, he insists he is not to credit for the German economic miracle. And the Marshall Plan also, we believe it or not, it was a huge success in Europe, but it was not due to the Marshall Plan either that Germany has succeeded. You can see on the pie chart here, Germany didn't get a big slice. It was the United Kingdom, France, Italy, the Allies got all a big slice there. and the others in between and at the top. Also, Netherlands were allies, Greece, Austria, Belgium. So let's talk a little bit about that. So, for instance, Ludwig Erhard, he strongly believed that if he could build up the post-war social market economy using a private initiative built with checks against monopoly, cartelization, and extreme labor union demands, all of which existed in Germany beforehand. And he strongly believed only individuals could redesign and rebuild and the future of the country. He was doubling down on the Middlestone. So an economy with prosperity for all included the already established social welfare safety net. So with a newly revived institutional Mitbestimmung and Mittelstand sector to lead the way, Mittelstand became the backbone of Germany's export-driven economy. Now out with the old, in with the new. So the post-World War II German economy was devastated and ruined and in need of a complete overhaul. First, the currency reform. Second, the price control elimination. It began on June 20th, 1948, weeks apart. And secondly, marginal tax rates reductions began later in 1948 and then in 1949. Now, food filled the store shelves immediately after the currency reform began. So the new Deutschmark prices, savings skyrocketed, and the industrial output tripled in 2 years from these reforms alone. So by July 1949, Erhard affirmed the quality of German goods was improving, prices were falling, and the standard of living rising. So Ludwig Erhard did not expect a miracle, but that's what happened. 10 years after the war, the German economic miracle was a buzzword. In 20 years, and its economy was envied worldwide after that. And so just a few other notes about post-war. 20% of all the housing was destroyed. 1947, food production was 50% of industrial output at just 1/3 of 1938 levels. Germans' daily food rations were under 1,600 calories. There was a huge shortage of working age men. People grew their own food and visited farms on weekends to barter for food. You still see it. I mean, when I used to live there, right near the train station, they have little plots of lands that people just rent out to make, to grow their own gardens. So what would happen also when these people went out the country, widespread business to business transactions were taking place through a third party hired, known as a compensator, a specialist in bartering, who would find the right mix of outputs and inputs and match them up with his clients to satisfy their needs. So, the Germans were resilient and they found a way. They found a way to make it work. And with the currency reform, it was highly complex and it caused a large reduction in net wealth to many and a 93% contraction of the money supply. But then again, it was changing hands quicker. People weren't holding on to it as much. So, and then by ending the price controls and lowering the food production, it rescinded tariffs and it cut income taxes at all levels. For 1950 Germans with annual income of 2,400 Deutschmark tax rates fell from 85% to 18%. So that was a big drop. So almost immediately, German economy sprang to life. The unemployed went back to work. The legendary productivity of the German people was unleashed. Within 2 years, industrial output tripled. By the early 60s, Germany was the third greatest economic power in the world. And all of this occurred while West Germany was assimilating hundreds of thousands of East German refugees. So here, just some little colored bars, and I'll give you the details. So prosperity through competition. So he gives credit to the free market capitalism. And in these words below, this were in his book, what has taken place in Germany is anything but a miracle. It is the result of the honest effort of a whole people who, in keeping with the principles of liberty, were given the opportunity of using personal initiative and human energy. So let's talk about the Marshall Plan also. The Marshall Plan aid to West Germany was not that large. The total aid of the Marshall Plan and other programs, 200 billion, or I'm sorry, 2 billion as of October 1954. And then in 1948 and 1949, at its peak, the Marshall Plan was less than 5% of German national income. So all countries receiving Marshall Plan aid showed lower economic relief in addition. West Germany was making restitution and repaying reparation payments in excess of 1 billion. Okay, now we're at Mitbestimmung, sorry, codetermination. So let's start with that. So I had that up there for a while. Taking decades of collective agreements before finally codifying things into laws. All of the stuff that started with Mitbestimmung, this was all consensus was always built up. There was nothing that was rushed to a vote. It was all built up over decades. And it's part of a deeply rooted German legal ideal arising from the 1848 European-wide social movement. And for Mitbestimmen, the concept, mit, it means with, and bestimmen means literally giving voice. So the ideal business management economic path in parallel together with a social component. And then there are two versions. We'll get to that later also. So equal Erhard, Dormant and Forbidden, Weimar to Nazi years from 1919 to 1945, but with a strong post-World War II revival. This was when codetermination, the worker, shareholder, and company management laws were exacted. Erhard institutionalized Mitbestimmung in the 1950s in his new economic blueprint. Codetermination Act of 1976 set up the world's most democratic corporate governance model ever seen in capitalism. So, equal partition of shareholders, employees, management, and firms' decision-making process. Now, of course, at the end of the war, the large cartels and everyone that had financed the war, they were keeping a tight eye on them. So they gave in a little. This was the right time to do it, and Erhard took the calling to get it done. Because if they had built up and become too powerful again, that might not have happened. So in 1998, further advanced to employee as profitable investment, reward loyalty with participation rights. So it was always being added on to. And one good thing about it, it democratizes capitalism with an inclusive framework of conceptualized cooperation and industrialized applications which serve to fortify the benefits of cooperation and reduce inequality levels. So now we're going to move on to the two pillars of codetermination. It's a two-tiered system, supervisory boards and work councils. And this takes place on the company level. Shareholders, workers, managers sit at the company supervisory board in two-tiered system. So, in other words, shareholders, employees, wage earners, and then they all get together on the work council and they meet things out right on the shop floor there. And the work council is institutionalized cooperation between workers and employers. So by law, firms have an executive board. This is the supervisory boards I'm talking about now, with executives chaired by a CEO and a supervisory board of non-executives that are comprised of shareholders and employee reps and or union reps. Now, workers are represented on the supervisory board, but not on the executive board. The number of employee representatives is determined by the size and legal type of the firm. So
you're discussing how Germany employees their corporation.
So can I continue? So half of the supervisory board are employee representatives and half shareholders. A chairman of supervisory board elected by shareholders has an extra vote to break a tie. Okay, supervisory boards control appointments, management, board members, and other important functions like approving strategic decisions. Ultimate corporate power resides on the board. So just look at the work councils, and then I'm going to show you a diagram of what we're talking about later for the supervisory boards. So the work council is institutionalized cooperation between workers and employers. Facilitate workplace representative far better in real-time setting than trade union meetings. They aid a process to collect information and demands by better production and work conditions, and they fortify the social link and the loyalty between worker and firm. It helps to reduce quitting and absenteeism. It increases information flow, blind trust, and raise a sense of personal stakeholder investment. So councils have rights to see company information, consultation on changes and job security. They have positive effect on firm productivity, innovation, and investment. Employers must negotiate with work council if workforce charges or dismissals take place. Okay, so let's look at it. This is the codetermination, how it's done. So you see on the top, you have shareholders and workers. They form a supervisory board and they're elected. And now the trade union can be an advisor and advise them and they're in the sideline. They're not necessarily invited into that process. And then you see the executive board, it's all executives, they oversee and appoint, and it all passes through. It has to all be passed through the supervisory board, and they have to agree on it. So this is a system that works for them. And it's been doing quite good in most of Northern Europe. Okay, so actually let's move on because I know we don't have much time, and I talked about this. And these are the German model, the stakeholder model, and it's a coordinated market economy. And so the interesting thing is, by being a coordinated market economy, you can do the same thing and better as the aggressive American version, which is not always necessarily coordinated. Okay, and then here's some comparisons to make. We can, if we have a longer time, we can go over this sometime, but you see the difference. Go down the liberal market economy, go down the coordinated market economy, and you can see the difference. Like, for instance, inter-firm relations, third down, competitive for liberal. For coordinated, there's collaborative. Sounds much better to be collaborative in what you're doing. Also equilibrium, demand, supply, and hierarchy. And then coordinated, strategic interaction with firms and other actors. So employment, let's see, for the liberal market economy, full-time general skill, short-time fluid. In other words, they hire and fire a lot. And then here for coordinated markets, shorter hours, specific skill, long-term and mobile. They're not sending people all around to different places. Usually they get a job, they can keep it for a long time. So there's other ones to view there as well. We'll get to them later, maybe. Okay, so let me see. We don't need that yet. So what makes Germany so dominant in manufacturing? There's three main reasons. So first, they're all related to number one, the GDP, and then employment figures, and then also exports. So here, let me give you those three details on that. So three main reasons. Manufacturing is highly significant to the German economy. 22% of the GDP, higher than US and EU countries. Only South Korea and China have greater share GDP from manufacturing. Now, manufacturing jobs are a huge share of total German employment figures. Manufacturing propels German exports, which account for 52% of the German GDP. So contrast that with the US manufacturing exports being only about 14% GDP. Germany's 2015 425 billion net trade surplus, had everyone complaining in Europe about that. So contrasted to the US 2015 trade deficit of 668 billion. Okay, let's go talk about the 4 keys of this as well. And they are the first one, investment in workers' most skill-intensive labor force from unique institutional system with a functioning support network. And that's a support network is a dual apprenticeship model. It's a gift that keeps giving. Unsurpassed pragmatic training, the envy of all nations. Trainees learn high targeted, specific vocational skills from early age. The valuable on-job training, learning work skills with pay, combined with a formal classroom of vocational specific study, where they study the theory. So number 2, rich institutional network. So I'll explain that. Agency and organizations support the Middlestone firms. Those are the small to medium-sized enterprises that are the backbone of the German economy. And they support Middlestone firms with resources. They stay on the cutting edge of manufacturing science with culture of continual improvement. So the Middlestone is the 3rd reason. The Middlestone is Germany's legions of SMEs, small to medium-sized enterprises, the economy's backbone, seasoned entrepreneurs, family businesses, and hidden champions. The hidden champions are those at the creme de la creme of the Middlestone. So they're celebrated subsets of firms you have never heard of. They dominate niche product markets as world leaders in top positions of market shares in many categories. So the 4th reason is the strategic maintenance of place, leveraging position in any city, region, or state you're in to fit into the local network of an embedded sustainability mandated for everyone to achieve prosperity. The local community, working with state and federal agents, implements key policies to suit your needs. Even, when I was in Germany, I was working there. I was just working in the opera house, in a theater for a couple of years. And I walked into the bank. They called me over. They recognized, you're new here. Tell us about yourself. Maybe we have a program for you. They're always looking for ways to bring prosperity to the community. So I ended up giving them some free tickets to come do a show. That's about it. So anyways, so here's Germany. What makes Germany so dominant in manufacturing? So here's your 3 reasons. And then you can see also the position of the United States, the position of Germany, and China and South Korea right above that. So this is the same thing I read to you over there already. And then let's go to the next one. And then here we have a bunch of different indicators here too. Let's look at the points. I summarize them for you on the top. Higher skill levels get higher average hourly compensation pay, $45.79 in Germany against 35.67 in the US. So wages are higher in German manufacturing, yet conversely, hours worked are lower. The mean number of hours per worker in 2013 was 1,388 against the US mean number of hours per worker at that same pay rate, 1,788 hours. So Germany is still competitive in global markets, however, with higher wages and less work hours due to their high productivity. So there's more information there. I gave you the main points. So let's look at this dual apprenticeship model. This is the gift that keeps giving for the German, for the Mittelstand, the Germans, the economy, everything here. So does anybody want to read? This is really a thought-provoking thing to read. So if someone has a good voice and they would really like to read, I'd really appreciate it if you read this, because I'm sure the people that read it will really pay attention to this more than the people that are listening. And let's hear a good voice. Anybody want to try it? If you do, let me know. If you don't, that's okay. I'll just keep on talking. But if you want to try, please be my guest. Anyone? No one. Okay, let's go forward. So the threefold purpose of the German vocational training system, promoting these three things: economic productivity, number one; number two, social integration in society; and number three, individual development. You know, they want you to be the best you can be. Now, developing a skilled labor force which can help to promote innovation in business. In other words, they have a high number of patents. You know, of course, I believe the Chinese have the highest in number, but as far as patents per 100 employees, it's much higher in Germany. So the third bullet point here: threefold purpose in the context of the interest of stakeholders: the state, the business community, young people, and parents. Government is responsible for ensuring a balance of differing goals. And one of the things that it does by having this vocational program where people work and then they study and they actually get paid while they're doing it. They're paying, the government's paying them. And you know, what it does is it certainly lowers the teenage unemployment rate. That's a big benefit of that program. So the last benefit here, it benefits vocational training can be helpful in achieving objects in multiple policy areas, which make it possible to address a broad range of stakeholders and favorably affect opinions about vocational training. Okay, let's continue. Now, this is a dual apprenticeship vocational training, individual, social, and economic. Again, this is from the state here. Collectively, the three goals reflect the interests of society, business, and individuals in the context of vocational training. They can be defined as follows. The individual dimension refers to the role of vocational training in developing the skills of the individual needs to meet challenges on the job, as well as other aspects of life. So vocational training should provide an opportunity for individuals to shape their own life, develop to their full potential, and increase their self-efficacy and motivation to learn. Social dimensions. So they want to make you a better citizen. So it refers to vocational training as a means of promoting the social integration of the younger generation, both in the workplace and society at large. The vocational training system should be designed to prevent social marginalization and integrate young people smoothly into training and employment. So, and last but least, you know, be a part of the economic dimension refers to the role of vocational training and ensuring a high level of economic, business, and individual productivity. The economic focus is on the developing of human resources by ensuring that there are enough workers with adequate skills and increasing their number and level of qualification. The business goal is to make sure that companies have an adequate supply of qualified workers. At the individual level, the goal is to ensure that individuals are employable and able to earn a living. Also important from an economic perspective is the efficiency of the vocational training system itself. Okay, so Middlestone, what's Middlestone? It's the German, you know, the German word Verstand, it refers to an estate or medieval model of society. So it's like a person's position, how they're defined by their birth or their occupation. And there were three principal levels, the upper one being the aristocracy, the lower one, the peasants, and the middle one, Mittelstand, was the free citizenry, the bourgeoisie, who were dependent on trades. So other EU nations with smaller Mittelstand profile cannot compare to the German Mittelstand. It's the dominant component of German economic system, unlike any other nation. So other German-speaking countries have something very similar, however, as a result of shared German culture. So what is the Mittelstand? So from small to medium enterprises in German-speaking countries, Austria, Switzerland. And it's a statistical category of 499 employees. SMEs with annual revenues of up to 50 million euros and up to 499 employees. Yet beyond that qualitative structure, it's also a culture. There are some that do more business than that, but they still consider themselves the Mittelstand. Now it's characterized by family owned and managed with long-term outlook in small town or rural setting, and a set of similar core values and management style. And they focus on items crucial to daily life, hardly noticeable and made in large numbers. That's the key to their success. So Ludwig Erhard, post-war economic minister, whose vision produced Germany's economic miracle, the Wirtschaftswunder, best describes it in this quote, going beyond the quantitative and stressing the qualitative nature of German Mittelstand, much more of an ethos and a fundamental disposition of how one acts and behaves in society. So let's do a vocabulary check. For ethos, that means a characteristic spirit of a culture, an era, or community as manifested in its beliefs or aspirations. Okay, so let's look at this diagram. And here you see the triangle, the pyramid, so to speak. So everyone in here, except for the capstone, these are large companies. And there's only like 501 of them, I guess, in Germany. And they give 31.69% in total German exports. Now, the other ones down below that, they're all Mittelstand. These are all small businessmen that run small businesses and hire people. And, usually in the neighborhood, they know them, they support the neighborhood, everything. These Mittelstand businessmen donate money lots of time to the banks, the Sparkasse Bank, because they support the development of things for the community. So it's a broad set of core values in the Mittelstand. In 2015, it views Germany as the business landscape in 3 distinct categories of Mittelstand. As you see the pyramid, over 99% of the German firms are Mittelstand firms, but less than 1% are not. So you see the difference at the top, the difference at the bottom, okay? But with revenues of 0.02% of the German firms with revenues over 1 billion euros, well-known companies, which include the DAX 30 companies, that's the German index for the highest making companies in the country. 30 largest companies trading on the Frankfurt Stock Exchange. Now, the upper-sized Mittelstand firms, they do from between 50 million to 1 billion euros a year. They're a form of unique and distinctive group in the red, so to speak. There where you see 108, it's like 0.6%, or no, 2%, the very top, I believe, the large Mittelstand companies. Let me correct myself on that. So they form a unique group, but in the red, a distinct group in the red is as most export-oriented firms behind Germany's export success. These Mittelstand champions are the engines of the engine of the German economy, and they call themselves. Or there was a book written about them, and they're called the champions. So Mittelstand champions. So statistics are significant to Mittelstand hidden champions. They call them the hidden champions, excuse me. It was hidden. I forgot they were hidden. So let's look at a few statistics here. Very quickly, I highlighted them for you. You can see Mittelstand companies, 95% family owned, less than 10% appear to be taken over. So they occupy a place in the community, and they have a higher ratio of research and development, R&D investment, twice as much. 54% of SMEs brought new product process to the market, 2008, 2004. So they outnumber the regular business. These SMEs, they brought new products to the market. EU averages only 34% for the same time period. So they're well ahead of everyone else. Only 1.1% of the world population. Germany has 48% of mid-sized world market leaders. That's almost half. So in 2009, Germany's 9% share of world exports outdid the US, an economy 4 times larger. Leadership continuity, 20-year average, 7-year average for 2,500 largest world corporations. So they stay around for a while. A quarter of the German GDP is manufacturing. Other large EU economies, only half that much. So the hidden champions invest 50% more in dual training apprenticeships than the average SME. And the hidden champions create 1.5 times more patents per employee than large corporations. So 82% of the apprenticeships in Germany do their training in an SME. So Germany's youth unemployment rate is less than half of the other EU countries. And there you have, from that alone, it really pays off very well. So let's look at some of the driving concepts. You know, they're just good business people, let's say that, and let's keep moving. And let's go on to the next one. Qualitative brings quantitative success. So this is their motto in the Middlestone. So products, they do high standards, impeccable accuracy, highly functional, unique, and focus, razor sharp, no confusion, be the best, strategy, long-term, benefit to the company, employee, customer, and community. So communication, cooperative, constructive, criticism encouraged, alert and present, training, dual model, best of both worlds, theory and application together, customer relationship, kept close, frequent communication, frequent discussion. They want to keep those customers. Many of them are wholesalers, so they're doing huge amounts and, you know, a small number of sales, but huge amounts per sale. Business model, made to last, made to lead, made to excel, leadership, continuity, results when kept with same family. Innovation focus is on fusion of technology, manufacturing, and marketing. They fuse all three together to get the best bang for their buck out of all of them. Okay, so workforce, valuable, it's regarded as a valuable asset. And low turnover, high productivity, highly productive. Then stability, product core process. Vertical integration ensures high standards. Clusters, strong B2B, that's business to business presence. Mutual dependence, business community growth. Okay. So here's some of the traits of these companies. So driving forces of innovation. And you see the difference between the large corporations and the hidden champions. And there's three of there. The hidden champions are in a phase of massive innovation. The effectiveness of their R&D activities beats that of large companies by a factor of 5. Their innovation processes are fundamentally different. Their innovativeness is both market and technology driven. So they're way ahead. You can see 65% of market and technology, they invest in that. Whereas everybody else invests all the way equally down the line. They put it all in where they have market and technology together. Okay. Another one, turnover rate is extremely low. They have a management strength. Look at the difference here. Let's see how we rate the US in there. Well, we're not in the top. We have a 30.6 attrition rate, turnover rate. Compare that to the hidden champions, the creme de la creme of the SMEs in Germany, 2.7. You know, chances are they work with the same colleague for perhaps even a lifetime. Okay, so here's the business to business. There's a lot of it going on, and look at the huge number of ports there. Mainly machine equipment. The Germans have always been known to be tinkerers and machinists. So that's a big aspect of what they do. And then, you know, then look, electrical engineering, another big chunk of the pie chart, industrial products, consumer products, cars and car parts. You know, look, they have Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW. So there's a huge section of the economy that is just supplying materials and parts for the cars. So they're like usually near the plants. You know, they know each other. They're not like receiving a box from another country. Okay. Let's check. Let's keep going here. So here's a look. I've got 10 different things, and we're looking at the Mittelstand. We're looking at the boom and the bust. So take a look here. Number 1, small to medium size, Mittelstand, large conglomerates, US, family run, publicly traded. We're going down the line. Number 3, stakeholder model, shareholder model. We had that in the last 2 talks, so you know about shareholder and stakeholder. Many B2B hidden champions, whereas in the US, the focus is on the US consumer base. training apprenticeship with trade and college classes. Private education system, trade and university are separated. State educational support. Number 6, this is a terrible one here. It's called the student debt trap. Social responsibility to employees, cooperation with the company. 7, responsible only to shareholders and investors. So decentralized system, well, boom and bust actually is centralized. Security with long-term growth, short-term growth and profit goal. Generational long-term strategy, quarterly planning strategy. So there's the big difference between that, shareholder and stakeholder. Now, let's talk about the banking for Germany. And actually, with banking, the public banks do better than the private banks in Germany. So, for instance, you can see this is the biggest one, the red color. It says Sparkasse. Those are the saving banks that every town practically has one. Then you have commercial banks, very small number there. And then the Landesbank, those are like central banks. And regional credit banks, they have credit banks for like people want to buy a home, things like that. And then they have credit cooperatives as well. But you can see in crisis, net profit after taxes as percentage of average total assets. And you see the Sparkassen, the big red lines up there. And also the green, those are commercial bank. No, the green are commercial, they're doing well too. And then credit cooperatives. It's hard to tell with these colors here. Anyways, let's move on then. And you see taxes, return of capital after tax as well. The public banks are doing okay. They're right up there with the commercial banks. Okay, so public banking dominates German banking system. Look at this pie chart here. In Germany, you see they outnumber all the other EU countries. They have banking branches all over the place. So Germany has also the highest coverage of branch banks as well. So let's look at we have a little donut cap here. Let me go back to that, sorry. So 26% co-op banks. So 43% Sparkasse, those are the saving banks. So right there, it's like 76%. And the rest are regional, foreign, and other. And then national, nationwide banks, not that many. So 70% of all banks in Germany are small, locally controlled, lending mostly to productive SMEs. But now this is changing a lot. They're being forced to change because the rest of the EU countries, they want in on the banking business. Okay, so here's the circular pattern of cash flow that goes through the public bank. So start in the middle. You see the savings bank red in the middle. Going out are loans. And they're going out to enterprises and self-employed persons. And they're going in that channel. Or they're going to, let's figure, I think the arrow is pointing to the left. So let's go to the left. Orders, investments, employment. So it's money being loaned out for all that. And then that's going back into production, taxes, consumption, which become deposits back into the savings bank. There's no hedge fund like siphoning off a bunch of money from anything profitable. It's just going all the way. It's going into the bank, the community bank, going out to people in the community bank. It's going to people in the community bank that buy production or work or pay taxes or consume. And it's all there. It's just, there's nothing being cut off from that, okay? And supporting the customer through crisis, and they've always done that. You can see this little red line graph here for the Sparkasse and then the blue one for the big commercial banks. And that's, they're looking into the crisis 2008 and on through that. And you can see who's done the best. The red line is constant and steady. You can count on them. Okay, so this is something called Kurtarbeit, and it was something that was initiated by Gerhard Schröder, and this is when he made the mistake of doing this. But not actually, he did the Hartz reform. It's not Hartz reform, but Kurtarbeit. That was around 2008, when everything was going bad, and given 67% of the population are in the Middlestone. So for 60% of the population to lose their jobs and go on unemployment, that would have been a catastrophe. So the government had to do something. So they came up with a short-term plan. And what they did. And so Germany's valued skilled labor was treated like an asset of the Mittelstand companies. I'm looking at the fourth bullet point here. In stakeholder capitalism, you never shed your assets to save short-term expenses. Okay, so right below that, we're on the sixth bullet point. The government fully supports this line of thinking and outlook, policies, and spending. So what happened? The result, Kurtarbeit compensated employees up to 67% of wages lost to form reduced work hours. And if employees were without work, they must take training and skill development classes. So they encouraged them to take more skills, and they made the money available to them for that. And they had the time then, because there wasn't enough work for everyone then. So in retrospect, what happened? 2009 alone, $16 billion was spent for Kurzarbeit, part of economic stimulus package. The small amount compared to a cost of supporting the unemployed. So rather than paying people to be unemployed, they just instituted this Kurzarbeit program, which was brilliant. It worked very good. 1.5 million workers used the program, 400,000 jobs were saved. That's over 1% unemployment. The program started September 2008 and ended December 2011. So, and it kept unemployment figures flat, and the Mittelstand sector supported in a temporary crisis. Okay, so we're going to look at the social welfare system, social welfare safety net. And believe it or not, that was actually enacted by Otto von Bismarck in 1883. Became national law. He made businesses contribute to a health fund. Now, what's not really told that often is that all of the workers, a lot of them that came into work in the factories and industrial revolution at this time, they were contributing to health funds among themselves. They would all contribute and then go see one doctor or be with a group. And then also, even in the mines, the miners, they all agreed that if someone died and their family was left penniless, they would agree to support them till age 18. So Bismarck was smart. Rather than letting them all get the credit for being good socialists and doing that, he suddenly started the social welfare safety net. And he even said, one of his quotes to another politician was, look, I don't care what they call it. Let them call it socialism if they want. Just let them know that the state gave it to them. That's all he cared about. So today, one of the most comprehensive welfare systems developed democracy. Its network of state, health, pension, accident, nursing care, and unemployment insurance is Germany's social spending is the largest category of the public spending. Now, 918 billion euros for 2016 public social spending amounted to 29,000 of GNP, quite a bit. So family help includes basic income for pensioners and permanently unable to work and handicapped. Family benefits per child, 219 euros for the first, second, and the third one gets 225. And then if you have more than that, it's 250. They want the Germans to populate so that they can have a bigger population. So they're doing everything they can to encourage that. Even when I worked there, I have a friend, American lady, and she was an opera singer, and she brought her kids to live with her, and the state paid for her 3 kids. She would get Kindergeld every month to take care of them. So childcare option available for working mothers also. Children's rights are scheduled for inclusion basic law in 2019. In Scandinavia, they already have it. So full coverage, full pension at 63. I think it may have gone up by now, I'm not sure. So health insurance is required by law. Medical care guaranteed by a full spectrum of hospitals, practices, medication, preventive health care, and rehabilitative clinics. You can go to the spa. If you're too stressed out, you go to the doctor. They'll give you money to go to a spa, believe it or not. So let's slow down here. So let's go another page for this healthcare system for Bismarck. Shaped by a 135-year historical process of growth, social experimentation, and improvement. Highly competitive capitalist economy with a comprehensive social welfare system. So what happened also, he was one of the first ones to give out sick pay, Bismarck, and his health insurance. And that alone stopped a huge attrition rate of people that were leaving for the new world, going to Australia and South America and the US. A lot of people just stayed put because they figured, wow, while they're sick, they'll be getting paid. They thought that's good to have a job, do it. So anyways, they provide the German workers with extensive benefits from cradle to grave security, and established 1880 the German parliament legislation with two goals in mind. So the first German nation actually came about being in 1871. So 9 years later, they had a general healthcare plan. So it was to help workers meet life's ups and downs without conflict and worry. And by so doing with socialism, make socialism less attractive to German workers. So Bismarck's insurance scheme was perfectly timed, but not exactly an entirely new idea. And as I told you already, it was being done by a lot of the people there. So he figured, why let them get the credit for it? We may as well have the state give it to them and get credit for it. So principles and delivery system. Original principles, we spoke earlier, solidarity, self-government. They still guide social policy development, okay? Serve as the blueprint to other nations for their own social welfare policy development. Excuse me. All of the stuff you see everywhere else, it was all built off on the original model of the German healthcare system. Centralized state-run system does not provide benefits like other developed countries. So the whole system was greatly strained by the 1990s German reunification, giving some benefits to 16.5 million East Germans absorbed into the system who never contributed to it. So here's another Bismarck quote at the bottom. The insurance law was manipulative, clever, worked well, and left a great inheritance. Steinberg says, that was his biographer. But I think Bismarck never cared much that he was the founder of a welfare state in Germany. He was an autocrat, so of course not. So here's a look at some of the central actors in the healthcare system. So, let me back up on that after all. So you can see how they all intermingle. And from the bottom, Federal Joint Committee of the bar on the bottom. So they're checking to see things are being done right. German Hospital Federation, that's on the right side of the screen. See that in blue? Right in the middle, Federal Association of Sickness Funds. There's all kinds of organizations and brotherhoods and things like that, that they go all the way back to Middle Ages. You know, when there was no one to be taken care of, people in the community would take responsibility for it. Okay, so that's pretty much it. I guess we can take some questions now.
Thank you, Michael. I'm gonna open it up for Q&A now. But before I do so, I just have a quick question. You had a very interesting slide exposing the originality of the German banking system, which, if I understand correctly, is more towards community banks and public banks. So what I want to ask you is, how much lending is done to interests like real estate, for example? Because I know in the UK and in the United States, you have over 70% of all bank lending going to the real estate industry. So do you have any statistics for Germany, for example?
Yeah, that I don't know about, but I know also that, you know, they don't have any speculation there in Germany. they do now. A lot of people came into Berlin, they tried to create it. But the Germans want to make sure that the Middlestone, that they have a place to live. They don't want to ever see a real estate bubble and see people on the street again. I mean, it happened in Weimar Republic and places like that. So they've learned their lesson. They don't really want to ever see that again. And by keeping a handle on the bubble, on real estate bubble, that's how they do it. And then they have special banks for people to do that. And then also the local banks, the Sparkasse, they can't loan to anyone outside of that that jurisdiction, that area code. So that means that most of the bank loans that are going out to people that that are in the community, in your community. They still have community banks there.
Okay.
Does that help you?
Is there a policy behind this, or is just like a cultural norm? Like in Japan, they had what you call credit guidance, window guidance, for example, which is just some sort of mandatory rules, not even mandatory, but some sort of suggestions coming from the Ministry of Finance.
Right.
But in the case of Germany, I was wondering whether this is just a cultural norm. They just decide to refrain from throwing money into speculative interests, and then doing more so for production-oriented activities.
Well, Germans have a long history of suffering. It wasn't just 2 world wars. Before that, there was a 30-year war, and it was all fought in Germany. So that means that all these soldiers that came from Scandinavia would fight the soldiers that were coming from the Netherlands, that was owned by Spain then. So they have a long history of really paying attention to this kind of thing. And what actually happened, believe it or not, is that when the Swedish army was marching through Westphalia, they felt they wanted to make amends for sending all these military men through there. And they gave a huge sum of money to the state of Westphalia. And the state of Westphalia, they just didn't know where to put it or what mattress to put it under, right? So they started a development bank, and that's the one that all the development banks in Germany are modeled on. It was a tremendous success. It helped them fast forward their ascension into these sectors like the energy and the chemical and all those other sectors that the countries were industrializing into and moving into during the industrial age. So does that answer your question? Or
yeah, thank you, Michael. So I'm gonna hand it over to the audience now. I see some questions in the chat. I think Larry has a question. Go ahead, Larry.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentation. It was fantastic. I have my first question. My first question is about the age. Are you aware? I don't know what it is, but I know in other European countries, the age is very low when they have a choice of, or they have to take a test, which decides at a young age whether they go to a trade school or whether they go to the university. Do you know what age it is that Germany makes the youth decide that?
I'm not sure on that, but they have something called gymnasium, which is like a high school type age. But somewhere around like 13 to 15, they start separating. You're either heading for a production type job, or you're heading towards an upper university job. But the point is that a lot of young teenagers don't know what they want to do. They'll get a skill. They will learn a skill, and when they go there, and they teach them a skill, and that's part of all that I was reading about for the dual apprenticeship model. And then the state actually mandates that because they want to make sure that these citizens become upright citizens, that they have a way to make an income, and that they just weren't like allowed to do nothing in their formative years. They try to put them into trade schools. In fact, I think Schröder was one himself, or Helmut. I forget the other There was one German chancellor that came through the trade system, you know, the trade school system, and he became a chancellor. So, you know, in Germany, they have a respect for all jobs, you know, even someone who is a waiter, they respect anyone that's working and making a living.
Yes, I live in Europe, and I have that feeling, and I really appreciated your insight about getting a dead response if you asked what people did for a living, and that really does speak volumes just by.
Well, that's like saying, let me see your bank account.
I fully get that, and I think I also have that when I return to the United States. I have the same feeling. It kind of makes a lot of sense. The reason I ask is because I spent 20 years in Czech Republic, and the age there is 14 that they have to decide.
Right.
And I'm wondering if that's really sustainable for the future, the way that society is developing, and how flexible is this system as far as you know, adaptability and maybe changing that age. Or you did mention that trade schools or the apprenticeship and colleges are together, which sounds like a very clever thing to do. How much is that for people to make a shift or a change? How flexible is it going with the way society is evolving?
Well, you know, there actually are a lot of the children of the Middlestone owners that are not willing to keep the business going, you know, and they want to do something else, go to school, be a fashion designer or something, who knows what, you know. But there's a substantial number of them that are doing that now too. So it really is a bit of a I don't want to say problem, but it's an issue that they have to address. And then as far as sustainability, it's always great to have this whole educational network set up. I mean, like people from other countries will come, and they'll even go to a jail in some of these countries, like in Australia or even Norway, you know, where they teach you, a trade, you know, so they can learn how to be an engineer or something. You know, this may sound crazy, but I've heard a few instances of this when I was traveling abroad, and I don't know if it's true, but I heard that. And you know, it's a wonderful system they have set up, because it's a dual apprenticeship. In other words, while they're doing the hands-on job, they're also doing theory, and they're working in the actual job, so that they can see if they're going to like this job or not. They might be able to say, you know, I don't think this is going to be good for me. I mean, I got a degree in microbiology, and I knew when I was graduating that I didn't want to work in a lab. So, you know, after all that time, I have to do something else. And yeah, so I can't say, you know, it's a good system that works. And, you know, when they get the migrants and the people that want to live there, and if they get them young enough and they go into the system, they can make it through in one generation. Usually it takes 3 generations for that.
I'm gonna come.
Pardon me?
Larry, do you have more questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one further follow-up. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hope that sounds.
No, it was very informative. Thank you. Thank you for that. The other question is, how does it work in the whole system, which maybe I missed it. You mentioned it. How is it that DHL is owned by the German Post?
You know, I never figured
How
that
does
one
that
out.
work out, this competition of or supporting a private industry by the government? How does that fit into their model?
Well, I guess, you know, the government figured that all this mail is going out, and it's all going out to UPS and FedEx and other foreign businesses. Why don't they have a German one? So, I mean, I'm sure that they might have got together with some people and tried to sort of like steer them into doing that. You know, I would suspect that, because that's normally what they do, you know, because they see there's a huge amount, you know, in freight and in trade and mail and stuff like that. So why not just have your own national company? And it's kind of like you suggest, it is part national and it is part private. I think that's what you're indicating, right?
No, not at all. I don't understand how it's allowed for the state to support a competition within the marketplace. I didn't notice that within any of the things that you described about the German capitalistic system, that the local people wouldn't say, hey, whoa, wait, why is the government supporting a private industry? Why is our taxes competing against us?
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because I'm not sure about that either. But the only thing I can think of is that they wanted to have a stake in that business.
Okay, you're not the only person that doesn't know the DHL is owned by the German government. So
No, I knew it was. I thought it was owned by the Dutch, actually.
What's the percentage of ownership? What is the share of government ownership? Is it 100% owned or?
Years ago when I was, it was years ago, it was a third. So I'm not sure.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
So
that would make sense in a mixed economy model. There are many examples like that. There was a time where Orange, for example, the telecom company in France I think the government is still the majority shareholder. You also had the electronic corporation known as Thomson. Until it went bankrupt, it was almost completely owned by the state government. It's not really much of a curiosity in some European countries to see the government holding, majority shares in a private corporation.
Thank you both very much. I really appreciate it. I'll be quiet now.
Yeah, thank you.
You can come back again. So Yanis, let's go.
Yeah, I have two comments. One is about the banking, the German banking sector that I'm going to leave for last. But first, I want to make a remark that it's really not proper to compare Germany and the United States, for example, because we use different nomenclature. So, for example, Germany is forced to have like basically no military, while the US has a big military, which, as a matter of fact, is big part of the social welfare program in the United States. The military is the biggest social welfare program. I mean, besides the producing the weapons and all that stuff, you have all these people who otherwise they wouldn't have a job, and they are supported by the government. So, and Germany does not have that because it cannot have a military. So they save themselves the military cost. So that makes it easier for them to spend on social welfare. But I would expect, since they don't have the huge defense expenses, that their social welfare is kind of low for a country that doesn't have to spend on the military. That's the first comment. I don't know if you have anything to add to that before I go to my banking comment. Well,
it was very astute of you to say that basically the military is a form of I don't want to say it's a welfare agency, but it's basically a way to have a job without, even if you don't want a job, you just sign up.
Can I add something to that? Yeah, there is a welfare part, which is makes sense, but we also should not forget that the military is the source of most innovation in the United States. Like the tool that you and I are using now to communicate is from the military, the internet, and many other ones. And there is a beautiful study by Mazzucato showing that all the smart elements in the smartphone are actually from the military. So it should not be seen just like how do I call it, a social welfare program, but it also should be seen as something that brings in innovation that is later used by the civilian industry.
No, of course, by all means. I mean, all technological progress is done for military purposes first, and then it percolates to
in this case, it comes from the military before we use it, before it even gets to the civilian place. How long ago do you think they were using the email in the military?
Yeah,
they just gave it to you and asked because they found something better.
The R&D part, though, is a small part of the defense of the defense budget. Most of it is to to pay salaries and pensions of, you know, military personnel, veterans, and all that stuff, which is the social aspect of the military. Of course, the R&D of the military is tremendous. No doubt about that. And actually, the Germans, actually, they are active in military innovation. So they do research, R&D for military purposes, and they export that. But you know, they don't spend too much producing hardware that is gonna rust in 20 years, and then you have to put more. So it's kind of that they got the best end of that part. That's smart on them to actually to benefit from that post World War II regime. Now on the banks, though, I do want to differ a little bit. I think you kind of you sanitize, like you presented like a very rosy picture of the German banking system, but German banks were huge behind the European sovereign debt crisis because they had made huge real estate bets all over Southern Europe, mostly in Spain, but in other parts too. So they had to be bailed out big time, and actually Germany was the single country that resisted banking integration in Europe and banking transparency. And part of the reasons they didn't want to show everybody else all the skeletons that are lying in their Landesbanks. So I admire Germany's economy, but at the same time, they don't play by the same rules that they want others to play. So in their banking system, they still maintain a big secrecy status within Europe, and they resist European banking integration.
Yeah, the bankers are always up to something, aren't they?
No, these are not the bankers. These are the Landesbank. These are like it's like the German.
Well, the Landesbanks were the ones that made investments. You know, so that the Sparkasse, they used to give their money to the Landesbanks.
Right, and they don't want transparency. They want the transparency from everybody else in Europe. So they want to go in the Greek banks, the Italian banks, and the Spanish banks, and they wanted to know every nook and cranny of their balance sheets, but they didn't want to divulge or show to the rest of the Europeans what they are doing with their Landesbank and how they do their loans and what are their balance sheets and the loan to savings ratios and all that stuff. So the Germans resisted that. I mean, smartly from their part, because one way to maintain your financial sovereignty is to keep your secrets to yourself. And just I wanted to point that out, that they are very protective of their own system.
Thanks for mentioning that, because you're right. Your point is right about that.
Tom Rosman.
Yes, hi guys. Yep, a couple of comments. So first of all, the German vocational system is really the it's the model that I think the world should be using. In fact, the amount of money that we spend in the U.S. on vocational training is just abysmal. We trail most other developed countries by a wide margin, including other European countries like Denmark and France. So the vocational training that they provide and that system gives a huge leg up to their businesses. And then secondly, I wanted to comment that the thing about Germany, working in Europe and doing a lot of business with European companies, the thing that Germans really excel at is incremental innovation. And so they're great at the factory floor, at appreciating the value of manufacturing and how much innovation does take place through actually making things. And I think that was one of the big mistakes that the U.S. made in the 70s and the 80s, was starting to outsource manufacturing to other countries to save costs, when in fact a lot of that incremental innovation desire. You know, Andy Grove, the former CEO of Intel, was very big on this and was highly critical of the U.S. for not appreciating the value of manufacturing in the U.S. and really maintaining that level of innovation that takes place on the factory floor. And then one additional comment was there's a fantastic book called The German Idea of Freedom, and it talks about how, you know, just as was previously discussed, the actual cultural zeitgeist of the German people is very different, and it was formed in the Middle Ages, and there was this dual responsibility from the rulers. You know, that Germany was made up. They were one of the last major countries to form. They didn't actually form as a unified country until 1871, and so they actually have a far different social contract and a far different view of freedom and the way that the relationship between the state and the citizen. So I think that has a big impact on them having a much more cooperative approach, and it doesn't mean that they always have the right approach. You know, Volkswagen has gotten into some pretty big scandals with the whole diesel issue, and other countries have not done well also. But you know, in the 2008 crisis, there was a wealthy corporate executive who committed suicide because he just was so disappointed with himself that he failed to provide what he thought of, or what should have been thought of as his responsibility to take care of the workers under his purview. So it's really fascinating when you look at all these factors put together and how that shapes how Germany approaches business, and also the formation of the business culture and society's issue on that.
Yeah, thank you. You always have good comments to make. Thank you very much.
Very good. Let's go to Alec.
So yes, three things very quickly. One is the influence of religion in Germany on economics. For example, the notion of subsidiarity essentially comes from Christianity, to allow the lower levels to decide for themselves and go only to upper levels when some kind of difficulty appears in deciding for themselves. The second one is, what about the ecological aspects of the German capitalism? And finally, what was the state that accepted Georgist policies in Germany? There was a whole program on that, and I forget the state and also the person that made a presentation on it.
Baden-Württemberg. It was Baden-Württemberg, and Dirk Lohr was the professor you're talking about.
Yeah, can you write it in?
Yes,
in the chat, please.
I will, Alex.
Thank you. What about ecology and the influence of religion on political and economic ideas and policies?
Well, I do know, like I say, that it was part of the Holy Roman Empire at one time. So, in other words, the decentralization of all the small parts of Germany, like someone mentioned, it wasn't until 1871 till it formed as a country, and Bismarck had a lot to do with that, and nobody believed that he could do it, and they, they were always getting ready to put a gag order on him, or he was breaking constitution left and right. But then when he finally reunited Germany, they couldn't believe that he actually did it. And it was like 27 different provinces or 27 different people together. And they had, and when they first started, they had like 3 and 4 currencies that they were using until they got it down to one Deutschmark instead of a single currency. And that took a while. So the Germans have always lived through adversity and a lot of struggle. So they have a highly developed sense, for developing security. And so a lot of that has been, it goes into the social welfare system. That's why he originally set it up. And he set it up, like he said, it was manipulative. He set it up because he didn't want the socialists to keep getting credit for it. So he set up one for the state.
Mm-hmm.
So on that, and then, during the 30 Years' War, that's the thing. Everybody in Germany has a story about the 30 Years' War. I mean, all you had to say was an army's coming to town, and the whole town would clear out and rush into the forest. That was a terrible way to live. And some areas, it took them decades to recover.
And Michael, what about ecology and?
Well, they're trying to go green. They have a green party there and everything. So they're really doing a lot of stuff like that. And up in the north, they're trying to harness all of these winds up there in Scandinavia and also the sun. You'd think they wouldn't have a solar panel industry in Germany, but they do. And I mean, they're very big on that. They have a green party.
Yeah, but it's a very small party. Yes, does it have?
It's marginal for sure, but people are aware of it. Especially in most of these northern European countries, like Sweden, they basically reuse all their trash. They basically don't throw any trash away. Everything gets recycled practically, and people think it's fun to go out on a walk and look for things to pick up to recycle. So I hope that answers your question. I know I didn't quite give you an answer on the green movement like that. I'm not that well versed on that. And I mean, but more so than any other country, they are moving toward that. I mean, Norway has a fleet of electric cars. They use all that because they basically have their own gas, but they don't use it. They basically have that all in a sovereign wealth fund. And they use 4% of the earnings that they make on that every year to pay, to bankroll the expense account for the country. So they're very fortunate.
Yeah.
But I know that they're trying to develop batteries all the time, and the Germans have a huge number of research institutes that people do all kinds of research on. Yanni sort of alluded to that when he's saying that they're on the research end of the military, rather than buying some weapons that rust and go bad within like 20, 30 years. So I hope that's an answer. I know I didn't quite do it on that, but that's about it for now. I'll have to look into that myself.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. That's exactly, it's 8:01. So I wish we could continue because this is a very exciting and interesting presentation. But so that's all we have time for tonight.
Which country are you doing next?
Yeah, Michael, would you announce
Sweden?
Sweden, okay, Scandinavia.
Yeah, the Nordic capitalism.
Nordic, okay, sounds good. So thank you all for coming. We hope to see you 1 week from now. Oh, by the way, Mardi is of course scheduled for this week again, but we have another event, a webinar by Ed Dodson. So you may wanna visit the website to see. It's about mortgage finance and its role in the 2008 financial crisis.
Is this going to be on Wednesday on Marty's time?
Marty is always on Wednesday. That won't change. It's a course, but Ed is teaching on Thursday.
On Thursday, okay. And that's a one time or it's a 5 series?
Well, it go to the website, Yanni, and check. It's a webinar. It's one time.
One time, okay. I think I have signed up. Okay, thank you.
Okay, good. So we look forward to seeing you again Wednesday and Thursday.